So I'm Peter from Hasselt University in Belgium. What we did is not entirely a technical paper in the traditional sense of the word. We made like an overview of what's currently available in the MMOG landscape. And we did that together with some people from industry partners, Filip and Peter from NEOPICA, and Kris from Visual Impact. So these are the outcomes actually of the Omega project, which was a project that ran for 2 years from 2011 until 2013. That was like collective research between ourselves as a research institution and game developers. And the main goal was to investigate the feasibility of entering the MMO market for small game developers. Not really like AAA titles, but more like titles that would be traditional for a small game developer to work. Certainly, the Belgian and Flemish context we are very as well, so the results might be interesting for people to have a look at as well. The two main focus points of the project are, first of all, the analysis, that's what I'll be presenting now, of the current market and some opportunity identifications. And the second thing is to investigate whether or not we can use cloud platforms as an alternative to dedicated hosting solutions. So that's one of the things that we were discussing in the poster session. So do join us for that session as well if you are interested in those results. So anything that I'll be presenting today is available at this project website, this collective research, so we had to publish all of the results afterwards. So everything that you're going to see here, including all of the details on the cloud platform analysis, etc., is always available at this URL. So this work will focus on the taxonomy of MMOs, and why do we want to do that? Well, if you look at most of the existing work, then it really focuses on the major titles and also on the major genres that are within the MMO market. But if you look at the context of the small developers, and they really want to target the niche markets probably, you want to go for the AAA titles, and maybe some titles with less public exposure. And if you want to create a comprehensive overview of what's really available in the market today, then we need to obtain combined information, as it says here, from multiple public sources. So what we propose is to really crawl the information that's already available. There is lots of information out there in the community, lots of community websites that make an inventory of everything that's available. We want to combine all the information that's there and present it in a uniform way. So what we ended up with, if we crawled all of the information from those databases, then we end up with a little over 4,500 MMOs in total, where we get information from, unique MMOs in this case. And we can narrow that down to 890 relevant MMOs in this case. So the filter that we applied there is to have MMOs that were referenced only once by just a single source, just move them out of the set. Also, those MMOs that were only in announcement phase, so they were only in beta, for example, let's not consider those and only have those in the data set that are actual MMOs that are deployed at the moment. One of the main problems is if you're going to crawl all these information sources, then there is no real uniform way in which all of these sources define, for example, the game genre. There is lots of concern about that. Also, the monetization aspects and the game design specifics are all mentioned differently in all the different sources. So we need to find some way to get this more uniform. Actually, even the games themselves might be referenced by different names in multiple sources. So that's another problem that we have to tackle. So what we propose is to create a set of uniform tags and to convert all of the source information that's available in these community resources into these different tags. And we want to really automate the process, so instead of doing all of this manually, which is really kind of a burden if you want to do that for like 800 games. So if you can automate the process, then we can easily add new sources of information because it's a continuously evolution in these community websites. Also, you can add new tags if you want. You can analyze historical information by analyzing data at different points in time. So the entire procedure on technical level is such that we really want to run some scraper scripts first that get the information from the website. So you just go to the public website and they get all the information by using Node.js and JavaScript. Then we convert all of this information into a database using some C# code. And then we use Google Refine-based algorithms to get sense out of the mess of the information that's in the database. So it's unprocessed data that's in the database, and we want to really clean it up using Google Refine, which is now open. Some of the examples of tags that are our system are, for example, distribution releases, the platform that the game is running on, the graphics type, etc. But these will all come back in the next few slides that I'm going to show you. The major thing that we want to distinguish the different games from each other is based on the genre. And genre is a really difficult term because it's defined in lots of different ways. So we split it up into two different tags in this case. We first define the game type. This is non-extensive list. So we can go from action RPGs to MMORTS games, strategy games, massive multiplayer online simulation of live games, etc. So there's an entire array of game types that we are investigating here. Also then, to define the genre, we have to combine this with the theme that the game is all about, for example, fantasy, or party games, for example, sports games, etc. All of these different themes are in there, and to combine these two, then you end up with the game genre as we define it in this case. The data that I'm going to show you here is extracted late 2012, which was the end of the project. But of course, all of the information is available, all of the scripts are available, so if you want, you can rerun it for essential. And we're going to focus here on the most well-known types, but of course, it's all the data is in the database, so you can also extract the data for the more niche markets if you want. So if you look at the different types that are currently available in terms of MMOs, then we can see clearly that with over nearly 70% MMORPGs at the moment are the most dominant MMO type, and probably the most historical type as well. It's what's kind of thought because everything started within the MMO type of games. That's followed by MMORTS games, and then MMOFPS games. All of the other ones are like niche markets here. If you look at the different game themes that you have available in the marketplace at the moment, then fantasy is the most important one here. That's due to the fact that most MMORPGs are fantasy-based, and those are the largest market. These are the market at the moment. And it's followed by sci-fi and modern. We can also split that up into the different types of games. So if you look at the MMORPG market, then as I said before, fantasy there is the most important game theme that you can see, followed by sci-fi and history games. But it's not really the same for example, the MMORTS games, the real-time strategy games. Those are more or less equally distributed among fantasy, sci-fi, and history in this case. So there's a bit of a difference going on there. That's followed by the modern theme. It's completely different for the MMOFPS games. So there's like no fantasy involved or very little. Most of them are like modern themes in this case. If you look at the different releases over time, so this is an overview of the time between, I think it's 1990, around there until the latest extraction point of the data, which was 2012. And you can see a steady increase in the amount of releases that has been done every year, but still the MMORPG type of game is still the most prominent game type here. If you look at the different client types that are used to really bring the game towards the player, then we can see that we either have a native client, which is just an executable that you run on your PC that runs natively on Linux or Linux, for example, or you can use a browser to act as a distribution platform for your game. If you look at over all of these years, then you can see that the majority is in fact native-based. There is just a minority that is based on the browser. You'll certainly see in the few coming slides that this is changing at the moment. So this is like historical overall different years that you extract the data for. If you look at the latest years, then it will be quite a bit different. You can also have a look at the different game types and extract the data for that. So for MMORPGs, it follows the same pattern that we saw before. For MMORTS games, there are actually more browser-based games versus native games. You can kind of correlate that, for example, with the system requirements that we have for MMORPGs games. So that we can see that most of them actually have low or most medium system requirements. So there are practically no MMORTS games that have high system requirements in this case. And also, if you look at the graphics type here, you can see that the majority of them is actually 2D based. So 2D is more naturally suited towards integration in a browser-based environment. So as I said before, there is certainly an evolution going on here. So if you look at the differentiation between the native deployed games versus the browser-based games, you can see that there is actually a growing trend towards the browser-based development platform. there is like a client and a native clients here. That's very prominent in the last few years, where you actually have this crossover point here. In 2012, there are actually more browser-based MMOs versus native. If you look at the native platforms, then we can have a look at the different operating systems that are involved here. You can see, for example, Windows is the most prominent platform, which is not that illogical, I think. Mac is upcoming, and Linux as well. And if you look at the different game types, you can have a look at the type of interaction that's possible. So you can have MMOs that are, in this case, PvP only, which means that there are only interactions between the different players, and there is no non-playable characters in the game. You can also have these games where you cannot play against other players, you can only play against other bots, for example, or other non-playable characters. And you have games where you have both elements involved. And this is like the majority of games, like 81% of MMOs at the moment, is PvP and PvE enabled at this time. The problem is, well, we cannot really attach a certain degree to it. So if it has some elements of PvP or it has some elements of PvE, then we classify them as both PvP and PvE in this case. It also aligns with some of the interesting remarks that we got from the industry. If you look at the articles that are published around this, you can really see that, okay, most MMOs will drive you either into PvE or PvP, and really no game gets the two in perfect harmony. So, but they would be classified here as PvP and PvP in this case. If you look at the different game types, you can have a distinction between MMOFPS, MMORTS, MMORPG in this case, and the MMOFPS type of game is the main type that has PvP only example, so it's here with about 40%. An MMORPG type of game has nearly no PvP only examples in the database. If you look at the PvE only case, then we have like no MMORPG games that have PvE only in this case, and just a few MMORPGs in this case. Why is that? It's very difficult to design an MMO game based on PvE only, mainly due to the fact, well, that's mainly our guess, is that it's very hard to keep it interesting for players because they make advances in the game. They get better at each time they play the game. So you have to like have an involvement in the non-playable characters as well here. So it's very difficult to keep up with the advances of the player. So to have like a game that's PvE only would be very difficult to design. Look at the user base. So this is not the amount of releases that are being done each year. This is really how many users are actually using that type of game. You can distinguish them into high user bases, medium or low user bases. And we have quite a lot of MMOGs with a low user base. So there is lots of MMOs out there that have very few players that actually play the game. And we can look a little deeper into those with the high user bases. So like this is like AAA titles like World of Warcraft, etc. And those are present here in this part of the chart. So if we find that here, we can see that in both MMORPG and MMORTS, the fantasy theme has the highest user base. And in MMOFPS, we look at the modern theme for that metric. So this aligns quite nicely with the amount of releases that are being done each year. So if you look at user bases, so people actually playing the game versus the games that are brought out into the market, you can see there is definitely an alignment there. So the games that are popular are also being made in those times. Looking at the time progression factor here, you can have a distinction between either real-time interaction between players. You can have a tick-based, where each player gets a different amount of time where he can conclude his actions within the game. And also you have the turn-based type of interactions here. Some player does an action, and then he has to wait, or the other players have to wait for that action to complete before they can do their own actions. And most MMOGs, in fact, are real-time based. So actions can be undertaken, but it says there at any time by anyone. It's a bit different for the different game types that we have. If you look at the MMORPG case and the MMOFPS type of games, those are mainly real-time based. But if you look at MMORTS, there are some tick-based games here and some turn-based games here as well, which aligns quite nicely with the traditional type of RTS games that you have. Like the MMO RTS variation aligns quite nicely with the traditional RTS type games. Okay, this is for the different Client types, so you have to look at the native clients versus the browser-based clients. You can see that there is an increase for the browser versions because they probably have less system requirements, etc. So it's less likely that they will be real-time based. So the most of the tick-based games here are actually within the browser. Looking at the graphics types, most MMOs are 3D based. While most MMORTS games, if you look at the subset of MMORTS, most of these are 2D based. And also, these are the most prominent within the browser-based market share, so that aligns quite nicely with the fact that browser-based games probably have less system requirements, are more likely to be 2D based. For client type here as well, so native we have more 3D MMOs for browser, it's just the opposite. For the system requirements, most MMOGs have low or medium system requirements, so it's not really very high ends like compared to traditional first-person shooters, for example, a lot of the MMO type of deployment. And the MMO FPS, probably not that surprisingly, has the highest percentage of games that have high system requirements, because that's also the case within traditional FPS games. You also have those that tax the system requirements the most. Character customization is also in here, and there we see that MMORPGs tend to have more character customization. These are prominent right here within the high customization factor. It's really a lot lower, for example, for MMORTS games. They focus really on the gameplay, not that much on the customization of your character and building, for example, or getting a new sword for your character. That's mainly present within MMORPG type. Okay, that's also been extracted here for the different game themes that we have, and there we can see that the fantasy type MMOGs are more likely to have high character customization. Looking at the monetization factor, we can have three different types. You can have buy-to-play, so you go ahead and you buy the game and then you can just play it once you've bought it. You can have pay-to-play, so you don't really have to buy the game, but you have to, each month have to pay an amount to the game publisher to keep on playing the game. And you can have free-to-play, so you can just download the game and you can start playing it for free. Note that the fact is, this only applies to the download phase, so you can download the game for free. If you want to play it, you can do so in a basic fashion. But probably there is some incentive to pay some kind of money towards the game developer to help them in developing the game further. For example, if you want to have some kind of customization for your character, you might have to pay for that within the F2P case. It is certainly only based on the percentage of number of games that are being released. So it's not based on real money that comes in from the different games. So if you look at that, for example, then in the US case, you can see that free-to-play games actually take more money from users versus really buy-to-play or pay-to-play games in this case. So while it is free-to-play, you can just earn it for free. If you really want to advance within the game, etc., it's not really free anymore. You can also look at the difference, the evolution over time, and you can see that really free-to-play is the way to go. In the last few years, there has really been a market increase in the number of games that are released as free-to-play in this case. So if you want to release a new game into the market, go for the free-to-play case. Looking at the different distribution methods, we can have retail games, so they are bought in the store, just a traditional DVD that you put in the store, or you can download them from a website. Of course, it wouldn't be that surprising that the amount of downloads here is the amount of actual games that are being released as retail packages to be distributed in the store. But then, like World of Warcraft is being pushed out on traditional media, but most of them are being downloaded. Item molds here as well. So if you have like the free-to-play type of game, you can buy additional items for your character, for example, to do the customization. And most games actually have that kind of functionality. 75% has that type of feature. And just a few things on the gameplay elements for the grinding factor, so the amount of time that you spend really doing repetitive tasks within the game, etc. We can see that for MMORPGs and MMOFPS this is really prevalent, so this is really pronounced here. It's much less there for MMORTS games. This is of course a matter of debate, so do you really want that kind of action in there, the grinding factor? Well, If you do it right, then it would be an improvement to the game. So some people really like that. They want to use that as a factor to keep on playing the game, to progress their character. Other people say it's like more or less over a version. We don't really want that thing. You can also do some crafting, so making new items, etc. for yourself. That's also prevalent within the MMORPG case. In this case, it's much less there within MMORTS and MMORPS, which are really focused on the interaction between the different characters. Okay, just to wrap up some general remarks. This is only like a subset of games that we present the data for. But there's lots more information in the database, so if you want to extract it, go ahead. It's freely available. It would definitely be interesting to have some historical analysis in there as well, which is made possible by just extracting the data at regular intervals. So just go ahead, run the scripts at regular intervals, and keep on updating the database. It's certainly possible. Everything that we presented here is available on websites, including the scraper scripts, the software used to compile the data, the data set as well as the extended analysis of this URL. Okay, that's it for what I wanted to present. If there are any questions, I'd like to take them.
Any questions? Peter has shown how he has mapped the landscape of online games at the moment. Any questions about that? Well, my question would be, so you've looked at all this data. So, I mean, what predictions would you make? If you were a game developer or even if you were a researcher now, what would you say are the important things that people need to focus on in the next couple of years?
Well, I would essentially say that the monetization factor is very important. So if you want to launch a successful game into the market, how are you going to do that? Are you going to have like a subscription-based model where you have to pay an amount of money, for example, 30 or 40 euros a month, keep on playing the game? It's really only relevant for AAA type of titles, I think. If you really want to go for the niche markets, then it's probably better to do it in a free-to-play type of game and really focus on how can we keep the players involved within the game. If you look at the different genres, etc., it's very prevalent to have MMORPGs in there, so it's probably best to focus on those, I think, if you want to have a large market share. But the other ones are up and coming, but it's very difficult to design a very good MMORPG game that you get lots of technical stuff involved because the interaction rate is very high in this case. You can have minimal delays between the different people. And you can also see that there are few actual examples of those out there in the market. There's certainly PlanetSide, PlanetSide 2, for example. Very few other examples that are really successful out there for that type of team. So I think it's a matter of getting all of the different metrics right to get a successful game in the market. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Yeah, I was wondering something. The MMORPG seems that they have
seems that when you see other services on the web, they just grow very fast. They have like winners take all schemas. I mean, in hardware. One start growing and growing and growing and growing. And do you think that you have the same kind of structure in MMORPG, or it's just like
it's continually evolving, of course, in that case, because like there is no, it's not like you download the game once and then you have the game and you play it till the end. Even MMORPGs are a continuously evolving end. So you have lots of new quests that are being involved each time. They launch new extension packs, etc. So it's continuously evolving. So it's not like just a traditional game that you just buy it once, you play till the end, and that's it. For MMORPGs, it's a bit different.
Yeah, what I mean is, what is strange is that the users are connected together in a service, but you don't have a network effect. When you have a network effect, what happens usually is that you have one Facebook, you don't have many Facebooks. No, and here, MMORPG, you don't have this phenomenon. It's like you have like many small services. So this is, for me, it sounds strange. Or this could mean that there are not really connected. Many people are just alone in this game, so they don't have a network effect. Or
well, I don't think that they are really alone, but they focus really on very niche markets. So like you have people with strange hobbies as well. You have people that like to play strange games as well. So there are some subsets of people out there that really want to play these more exotic type of games. And it's definitely true that you have some really huge titles out there, like World of Warcraft, everyone's been. But there are some niche markets out there as well that have good examples.
Okay. So thank Peter again.